So far in this course, we've talked a lot about the challenges of being a creative editor. We looked at how to set up and work with a timeline. We learned some essential skills needed to effectively edit dialogue, and we put it all to use while sculpting a cut to accomplish the goal of the scene based on the script. What we haven't talked too much about yet is the other half of the editing equation, working with sound and music. The next couple modules will be focusing on exactly that. To start, we're going to learn about the two types of sound you'll be working with in a cut. Then, we'll view a professional sound editing example from a Hollywood film. And finally, we'll deconstruct and analyze exactly how the sound is used in that cut to focus the viewer's attention and elicit the desired emotions from the audience. Let's begin. The first type of sound you'll use in a cut is synchronous sound. Synchronous sound is sound that you hear in a film that's matched or synchronized to the visuals on the screen. We're talking about things like a phone being hung up, a typewriter clicking and dinging, or a glass shattering. Anything that you see and hear simultaneously is emitting synchronous sound. Now, don't confuse synchronous sound with the idea of sync audio, which refers to the exact audio recorded at the time of filming. The synchronous sound that we're talking about might have been recorded on set, but it could also be Foley or library sound effects. Okay, so how, as an editor, should you approach synchronous sound? Should every potential on-screen sound source be equally weighted or even heard? Have a look at this shot from The Imitation Game. There's a very subtle detail going on with the synchronous sound. See if you can spot what it is. Did you notice it? Well, for starters, there's a bunch of off-screen asynchronous sound going on. You've got some crowd walla in the background, and a few phones ringing. But what's going on with the synchronous sound? Remember, that's only the sound from visible sources. How is it being used to focus our attention on what matters in this scene? Watch it again. The subtle detail is in the footsteps. As the two men in the foreground cross paths with the man coming towards us, their already subtle footstep sounds are completely eliminated, giving way to new foot sounds, now in sync with our primary character. Realistically, we'd be able to hear everyone's footsteps in this echoey hallway. That would be accurate based on the geography of the scene. But that would also be distracting, and fail to effectively support our shifting focal point. When it comes to synchronous sound, 100% realism isn't always best. The key to fleshing out the audio bed in any scene is to think about which sounds you need to move the drama forward. Which ones help to tell the story and should be emphasized, and which ones are no longer important. Try to remember this as a general rule for dealing with on-screen sound. The moment a synchronous sound becomes distracting or competes with a sound more important to the scene, its levels should be decreased substantially, sometimes even eliminated. For a good illustration of that point, have a look at this scene from No Country for Old Men, where we see Josh Brolin's character hitching a ride.
Shouldn't be doing that. Even a young man like you.
Doing what?
Hitchhiking. Dangerous.
Once the oncoming traffic passes and their own sounds have dissipated, we begin to hear only the sound of the car's interior. Notice how the interior sound starts off quite loud. The viewer is meant to be focusing their attention on this sound and feeling the presence of this new environment that we're in. After the sound has had a chance to anchor us in our new location, we can fade it down to its lowest audible volume and let it retreat into the background, making room for the next important sound, which in this case is dialogue. Did you hear where the sound dipped? The dip actually occurred while another car was passing to help obscure the decrease in levels and create a seamless transition. I'll play it again. This is where the editor and sound mixer have encouraged a subtle subconscious shift in the viewer's focus from the environment to the characters within it. A key takeaway here is that sometimes levels are decreased based on the intended focal point of the scene, not necessarily scene geography or object proximity. In this example, our position inside the car doesn't change, despite a substantial decrease in the sound it's emitting. When approaching the sound in any given scene, you should ask yourself a few questions. First, what's the goal of the scene? What specific plot points are we developing, and what information are we sharing? How can sound play a role in accomplishing this? What mood are we trying to create? What ambient sound will set the tone for that particular environment? And which objects, people, or things within the scene might emit sound that can help achieve these goals? Okay, so the second type of sound you'll use in a cut is asynchronous sound. Asynchronous sound is sound that does not come from a visible source. It's also known as off-screen sound. Asynchronous sound is often far more powerful than synchronous sound, primarily due to its incredible flexibility and the opportunities it provides the editor for creative storytelling. Think of sounds like dogs barking in the distance, a telephone ringing in another room, or a person crying behind a closed door. None of these sounds are tied to the visuals, but they go a long way towards fleshing out the environment and the events of the story. Okay, so let's quickly review what we discussed in this lesson. We looked at the difference between the two primary types of sound, that is, synchronous or on-screen sound versus asynchronous or off-screen sound. Then we talked about some sound-related questions that you should ask yourself before beginning your work on the timeline. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to deconstruct a professionally edited example that perfectly illustrates the effective use of synchronous on-screen sound to focus a viewer's attention on what's most important in a scene. Alright, I'll see you in a bit. Let's start by looking at an example that perfectly illustrates the effective use of synchronous, on-screen sound to focus a viewer's attention on key aspects of a scene. Here we have a scene from the 2011 film Final Destination 5. At this point in the movie, the main character, Sam, is worried that death is waiting for him everywhere he goes. So he starts to recognize the potential dangers all around him. Let's watch the scene without interruptions.
Samuel, il y a toujours comme un bourguignon. Allez, allez. Oh. Hand coming through. Oh, watch yourself. 5 minutes. Go on, come on, guys. Okay, reach in. Yeah, okay, yes, sir.
Could have been ugly, huh?
Yeah. Bad.
Okay, So it should be pretty obvious how important of a role sound played in this scene. Now, let's look at how the editor and sound designer use synchronous sound to direct the viewer's attention to the various dangers of his environment. As Sam approaches the kitchen, we transition into it with one of the more literal smash cuts I've ever seen, as we see the chef's cleaver chop the head off a fish. The sound of the cleaver whoosh, metal shing, impact onto the wood, and the guts of the fish are all emphasized to draw particular attention to the action. As Sam moves through the kitchen, we hear multiple fire whooshes,
Hand coming through.
sweetened with sizzles, all played at elevated audio levels.
Hand coming through.
On the more musical side of things, we also hear a drone begin, which will begin to serve to provide a general air of danger.
Oh, watch yourself.
As we continue following Sam through the kitchen, suckbacks are used to lead into the various moments, like his POV of the knife rack, which is accented with a bit of a metal ring, and then attention is shifted to the butane kitchen torch. Next, our attention is directed to the exaggerated sound of the meat slicer,
Okay, reach in.
and grinder, both of which use sounds far louder and more pronounced than you would hear if you actually were in the environment. And finally, the scene's tension peaks as another kitchen worker almost impales Sam with a roasting spit, the movement of which is accented and highlighted with a whoosh, a hit, and a cymbal crash, all layered on top of the climaxing music bed. These layers of sound all serve to achieve the ultimate goal of the scene, which was to create a sense of terror for the character and anxiety for the viewer.
Could have been ugly, huh?
Yeah. Bad.
They also ultimately foreshadow the events to come in the movie. Without the accents from synchronous sounds to tell the story of this environment, the viewer wouldn't necessarily feel the potential danger of the objects in the kitchen, despite viewing the exact same shots. It's a great, albeit exaggerated, example of using sound to very deliberately focus the audience's attention on exactly what matters in a scene. After each sound told its story and conveyed the information it was meant to get across, it retreated into the background with substantially decreased levels to make room for the next piece of sonic information. So let's quickly recap what we covered here. In this lesson, we viewed a professionally edited scene that relies heavily on the use of synchronous sound to drive the emotion and the drama in the cut. And we deconstructed the synchronous sound in the cut to gain a deeper understanding of how and why the different pieces of audio were used. Coming up in the next lesson, we're going to look at how you can motivate the drama of your scene with sound. Alright, I'll see you in a bit.